Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. What you're about to hear is something I never thought I'd admit. Not even to myself. 1:48 a.m. Red numbers on the alarm clock were the only light in the room, glowing like silent accusations. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope in my hands. It was already open, torn unevenly, like someone had tried to open it in a panic. Or maybe rage. Or maybe just shaky regret. Marlene was asleep behind me, or at least pretending to be. She always pretended to sleep when she didn't want to answer questions. 40 years of marriage teaches you which silences are honest and which ones are loaded with landmines. Inside the envelope were 3 photographs. Not digital prints. Polaroids. Each one more impossible than the last. I rubbed my temples. I felt older than I had ever felt before. The third photo was dated September 1988. I wasn't in it, but she was. Her hair was longer back then, and she was sitting beside a man I'd never seen in my life. His arm was around her waist. He had a gold chain around his neck and a grin like he knew he was stealing something that didn't belong to him. On the back of that photo, written in her handwriting, "This one's my favorite." It was the last time we saw each other before the wedding. The wedding. Our wedding. I stood up, quietly, not to wake her. I wasn't ready to hear her explain it. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and pulled out a flashlight I hadn't used since the power outage 2 winters ago. I stepped into the garage, turned on the beam, and started digging through boxes like a madman. I needed answers, and I was going to find them whether she gave them to me or not. I hadn't opened the box in over 30 years. It was shoved behind rusted garden tools, broken Christmas lights, and a half-deflated air mattress we never used again after the kids moved out. But I remembered the weight of it. A blue box with a silver latch, the kind you'd expect to hold old watches or coins. Not the truth. The latch creaked as I flipped it open, and the musty smell of old paper and something bitter, maybe mildew or maybe memory, drifted out. I pulled out letters, dozens of them, each one addressed to a name I didn't recognize, Elliot, written in Marlene's handwriting. My heart slowed, or maybe it stopped altogether. I sat on a plastic storage bin and read the first letter. It was dated 1985. We'd been married 6 months by then. In it, she talked about sneaking away from Lowell again, how she missed his hands and wished things were different. I blinked hard. My name, in a letter to another man, like I was the inconvenience. The second letter talked about our honeymoon. She called it a necessary illusion. Said she cried herself to sleep because it wasn't Elliot beside her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, flashlight wobbling in my hand, wondering how many dinners we'd shared while this box sat in the dark, full of someone else's version of our life. Then I noticed the smallest envelope, hidden beneath the rest. Inside it was a photo of a baby. A boy. Same eyes as mine. Same frown even. But I never had a son. We had 2 girls. My legs gave out for a second. I leaned against the wall, sweat breaking down my back despite the cold. I heard movement from inside the house. Footsteps. Light ones. She was up. Maybe she knew what I had found. Maybe she was about to confess. Or maybe, just maybe, she thought she'd buried the truth deep enough that I'd never dig it up. But I had. And now, I couldn't unsee any of it. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the soft glow of the kitchen light. Her robe was loosely tied, hair messy from sleep, or maybe panic, and she held a mug with both hands like it might shield her from what was coming. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My tongue felt like sandpaper and my throat was dry. Not from thirst, but from the kind of betrayal that settles in your bones. Marlene looked down at the box between us, and her lips parted ever so slightly. Not in surprise, in recognition. She knew exactly what I had found. She stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "I thought I threw that away years ago," she whispered. Her voice didn't crack. Mine would have. I looked at the photo again, the baby boy with my frown. Elliot's last letter dated the same year our youngest daughter was born. I wanted to scream, to ask her who the boy was, why she lied to me for decades. But all I managed was a horse. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't answer. She just sat on the cold cement floor like it was normal, like this was any other conversation between husband and wife. Because I didn't think you could handle it, she finally said, with an edge of pity that hurt more than rage. And I needed you to believe I was happy. I stared at her. Was I just convenient? Her silence stretched long enough to answer the question without saying anything. Then she added, you were safe, stable, kind. Elliot was none of those things. I loved him, but he would have destroyed me. You saved me from that, even if you didn't know it. My hands trembled, the flashlight slipping slightly. So you married me? While still in love with someone else? No, she said quickly. I buried him, Lowell. In my mind. In this box. I chose you. My voice finally returned, low and bitter. No, you settled for me. She didn't deny it. And that silence hit harder than anything else she could have said. I didn't sleep that night. She tried to come back to bed around 4 in the morning, like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just dug up the corpse of our entire marriage in a blue box behind a broken lawn chair. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that baby's face again. The resemblance was too strong to ignore. And the name on the back of the photograph? Lucas. I'd never heard that name in our house. Never saw it written in birthday cards or heard it whispered on late phone calls. And yet there it was, in her handwriting, just beneath the year. Lucas, 1988. Elliot never knew. That line kept echoing in my head. Elliot never knew. But now I did. And that changed everything. By sunrise, I was sitting at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped tightly around a coffee cup I hadn't taken a sip from. Marlene came downstairs like she always did, robe, slippers, and that soft hum she used to make when she watered the plants. She paused when she saw me, then opened the cupboard like I wasn't even there. I finally spoke. Did you give him up? Or does he just not know about you either? Her hand froze mid-reach. A glass clinked against the counter. You read everything, she said softly. You were never supposed to read all of it. I scoffed. I was never supposed to know the life you lived while married to me? She didn't answer. Instead, she sat across from me and, for the first time, looked small, scared. I had him a year after we married, she said, voice barely a whisper. I told you it was a miscarriage, but I lied. I had Lucas in New Jersey. My sister took care of the arrangements. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Arrangements. An adoption. Private one. Clean. Legal. No trails. I stared at her, stunned. You had a child with another man during our marriage? And you just erased him? She looked away. I was afraid he'd remind me of who I used to be. The betrayal wasn't just in what she did. It was in the decades of pretending it never happened. The birthdays, the anniversaries, the lies wrapped in smiles and holiday dinners. And now I was left sitting in the ashes of it all, wondering how many years of my life were built on air. It wasn't the lie that broke me. It was the ease with which she told it for 40 years. The cold precision of how she'd built a second life inside the walls of our shared one. And yet, just when I thought nothing else could surprise me, she said 5 words that nearly stopped my heart. He found me last year. My chest tightened. Who? Lucas. I dropped the spoon I hadn't realized I was holding. It clattered onto the tiled floor like a shot in the silence. What do you mean he found you? I asked, voice rising. You told me there were no records. You said it was closed, sealed, no paper trail. She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. That's what I thought. But he hired someone. Private investigator. He came to the library where I volunteer. I didn't recognize him at first. But when he said his birth date, I knew. I stood up, the chair nearly toppling behind me. You met him? And you didn't tell me? I was going to, she said. I wanted to. She stopped herself, and for the first time, I saw panic flicker in her eyes. I didn't know how. You didn't know how to tell your husband that the son you had with another man during our marriage found you after 4 decades? I was shaking now. Not with rage. With something colder. Something emptier. I felt like I was floating just outside my own body, watching this unravel like a stranger. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The photo was inside. I knew that chin. That jawline. It was mine or Elliot's or both. He looked like he could have been either of our sons. Or both of ours. And now I didn't even know what that meant anymore. "He wants to meet you," she said quietly. The room spun. All those years. The mortgage. The retirement plans. The long nights I held her when her father died. And somewhere, in all of it, she was holding on to a truth big enough to explode our entire life. I didn't say a word. I walked past her, through the kitchen, out the door, into the driveway where that stupid dandelion was still growing through the concrete. I stepped on it without even noticing. I didn't go back inside for hours. I sat in my car, keys untouched in the ignition, staring at the neighbor's porch light flickering through the windshield like a weak pulse. I kept the photo in my lap, the one of Lucas. I didn't want to look at it anymore, but I couldn't bring myself to put it away. His eyes had the same slant as mine when I was younger. The way his brow furrowed, it was identical. But what was worse than seeing myself in his face was wondering if he ever saw me in his mirror growing up. Did he know? Did he ever suspect his mother had handed him off to protect a marriage built on a lie? Marlene didn't call me, didn't text. Maybe she knew I needed air, or maybe she thought silence would smooth over the fractures. She always did that, acted like time could fix what words couldn't. But this was different. This wasn't a fight over burned dinner or forgotten birthdays. This was a life split in two, and I had lived in the wrong half. The next day, I waited until she left to run errands. Still pretending things were normal, I walked into her sewing room, a space I never entered, where sunlight fell across half-finished quilts and stacks of old paperbacks. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my hands moved on their own. I checked under drawers, behind fabric bins, beneath the rug. And there, taped beneath the bottom of her sewing basket, I found a flash drive. It was labeled for L. My chest tightened. I knew what it meant, and I knew I shouldn't open it. But I plugged it into my old laptop anyway. There were videos, dozens, all recorded in the last year. Some were of her speaking directly into the camera. Some were just her reading stories, flipping through photo albums. One video stood out, titled "The Truth." I clicked play. She was crying. Not quiet, graceful tears. The kind of sobs that shuddered through her body. "I wanted to tell you sooner," she said. "But I couldn't look you in the eyes and say I loved someone else first. I couldn't tell you that you were my second choice, even though you were always the better man." I slammed the laptop shut. That sentence hurt more than anything she had ever done. I didn't tell her I watched the video. I couldn't bring myself to. I needed to process it first, or maybe I just wanted to delay whatever conversation would come next. But the moment I shut that laptop, the weight of those words wouldn't leave my chest. "You were always the better man." It was meant to be a compliment, I suppose, but it landed like a eulogy. A few days passed in silence. She tiptoed around me, and I let her. Meals were short, conversations clipped. She pretended to read. I pretended to sleep. We were actors in our own home, waiting for the curtain to fall. But then one morning, I found a handwritten note on my nightstand. Just one sentence. "Lucas is coming today. 3 p.m. I understand if you're not here." I stared at the note for a long time. My first instinct was to run, leave, disappear, drive until the guilt, confusion, and grief were swallowed by miles of road. But I didn't. Something deeper kept me rooted. Maybe I needed to see him. Maybe I needed to look into his eyes and know for sure. At 2:58 p.m., I sat in the living room, knees bouncing, palms sweating. Marlene was by the window, her face pale and unreadable. Then the knock came. 3 gentle taps, as if he already sensed he was walking into something fragile. She opened the door, and there he stood, tall, clean-cut, early 30s, with an uncertain smile that looked too familiar. He stepped in slowly. His eyes flicked to me, and I stood up, not sure if I should shake his hand or collapse into the couch. "Hi," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "I'm Lucas." I nodded, not trusting my voice. We stared at each other longer than two strangers should. Because we weren't strangers. Not really. He looked like someone who had borrowed my face and lived a life I was never allowed to witness. "I just wanted to meet you," he said. "Not to ruin anything, just to know." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I wanted to say I forgave him or her or both. I wanted to say I understood. But I didn't. Not yet. So I said the only honest thing I could. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now." And to my surprise, he smiled. Not out of joy, but relief. Me neither. The days after our meeting felt like coming down from a storm. Nothing was fixed, not really. But for the first time, there was air in the room again. Lucas didn't stay long. He sat with us for an hour, maybe two. Asked questions about where I grew up, what I did for work, if I ever liked jazz music, because apparently he did too. It was awkward, hesitant. But it was also strangely easy, like finding a thread in a tangled knot and gently pulling. When he left, he hugged Marlene first. She cried into his shoulder like she hadn't allowed herself to do in decades. Then he turned to me, unsure. I reached out and pulled him in, awkwardly, stiff at first. But then I felt something inside me unclench. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. That night, Marlene sat beside me on the back porch, the same place where it all started with that stupid dandelion weeks ago. She handed me a mug of tea, something she hadn't done since before the silence began. "You hate lemon," she said with a small smile. "But I figured I owed you something familiar." We didn't say much, just watched the sky shift from orange to indigo. I could feel her waiting, for me to speak, to decide if I'd stay or go. I finally looked at her and asked, "Were you ever happy?" She didn't hesitate. Not always, but often enough that I didn't want to lose it. There was no cinematic kiss, no dramatic forgiveness. But I reached out, took her hand, and held it. Not because everything was okay, but because somehow we were still here. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. This story wasn't about perfect endings. It was about truth, about facing the things we bury deep. Sometimes, even after decades, the past finds you. And when it does, you get to choose what you do with it. Now I'd love to hear from you. Was there a specific moment in the story that hit you the hardest? Or maybe you faced a hidden truth of your own? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth always finds its way to the surface.